Welcome to the Meditation Podcast. You can find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. Today I'm excited to welcome Sylvia Wolfer. Shaped by the loss of her parents and two brothers, she brings together grief, science, mindfulness, and movement to offer grounded, research-informed grief support. She resides in Reading, in the UK, but she's a digital nomad for a few years, which is nice to know. We'll kind of learn a bit about that. Please welcome to the Meditation Podcast, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Roy, for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
No, and I think it's a very important one because I think it's a fact of life. We've all kind of dealt with grief. We see how we deal with it differently depending on who it is, and then we see how other people deal with it. But I know that like what you've been through is kind of shaped where you've kind of your journey. So I suppose we'll start off with that. You might kind of tell us how it all began, and I know it's a sad, but it's what happened.
Yeah. I'm happy to share my story because, I realized over the past few years that it actually resonates and that people are really in demand for raw, authentic stories about grief because, like you say, we all experience grief at some point, but we're still a bit illiterate as a Western society when it comes to grief. So I think it's important to normalize the conversation. And for my personal story, I have experienced grief a lot. And throughout my life, starting in childhood, when I was 7, my dad died of a heart attack very suddenly. We woke up in the morning, he was gone. And then 10 years later, my younger brother died in a road accident. Also suddenly, he died on the spot. So again, we woke up, he was gone. And that was very difficult to carry because back then there was not much support. And also, as we all know, when, teenagers are very sensitive, highly emotional, and everything is experienced very heightened. So it was difficult to manage that grief on my own. And fast forwards a few decades, just before lockdown, my older brother also died in a car crash very suddenly. We woke up one morning, he was gone. And that was very traumatic. That was really traumatic because it really felt like this can't be. There is a problem in the scenario. This is the wrong movie. It can't hit the same family again. And then a few years later, more recently, my mum passed. So we were a family of 6, the parents and 4 siblings, and it's my younger brother and me left now. It's the 2 of us left. So obviously, grief has been like a thread throughout my life, and I've done therapy for that. And one day my therapist said to me, listen, this is not my place to say that, but you've experienced grief more than average. And nevertheless, you're very hopeful, you're loving, you love life, you love people. I think you have a clear mission. You need to share it. You need to share your experience and help other people through grief. And my first reaction was very, absolutely not. No, thank you. Like, what are you talking about? I have enough grief in my life. I'm shying away from anything related to grief. There's no way I'm going to take on other people's grief stories as well. I just can't. I have enough. And I walked home that day. And like we mentioned before the podcast, walking is really, really helpful in many situations. And by the end of the walk, about 20 minutes, I thought, she's right. She's right. That's my mission. And then from that moment, it shifted from my grief, which is not a bad thing. It's really important to acknowledge our grief, but it shifted towards other people's grief and how can I help them? How can I make my experience useful and helpful to get people through this very difficult situation that none of us will escape. We'll all experience it at some point in some kind of shape or form.
And I'm just wondering, because sometimes when somebody passes, it's when you reflect, it's like there was some strange things. Like my father passed, it's nearly 3 years now. And he went, I have one brother, he lives in Holland. He went on a holiday with my mum there, had a fantastic time, came to Poland to me, had a fantastic time. Then they went to, I think it was Portugal, that they went with my mum, had a fantastic time. He was singing, she was recording him singing, there was even people enjoying it, recording them having such a laugh, my mum, and sent it to him. And they came back, they were going to get a Chinese, and he just dropped dead in her arms. And
oh my goodness.
But it was even though it was shocked, it was like he was saying goodbye to all of us when you kind of reflect back.
Yes.
And sometimes you see things like that. I'm just curious, was there anything, because it's very hard at the time, but later when you can reflect, you kind of go,
Yeah.
strange.
Yeah, well, guess what, Roy? This is actually the first time I'm being asked that question. And I find it interesting because I think you're right. It's a shared experience. And I would say, yes, well, I've had the same experience. So my dad's brother has lived in the US for all his life, and they were very close. They would talk on the phone regularly, but they hadn't seen each other in a long time. And just 2 weeks before my dad died, he had been visiting his brother in the US, and they had the best time together. And then when my younger brother died, we were teenagers, and he died in August. And in France, summer holidays are very long. And so we had just had the best summer, like playing music, having fun, enjoying the sun and our friends. And yeah. And then when my older brother died, actually, my granddad died a few months before that, and we all adored our granddad. He was iconic in the family. And so all the family gathered for his funeral. And my older brother kept saying, "This is the last time we're all together. It's the last time we're all together." And he was taking pictures and asking everyone to, get together to take family pictures. And we were all laughing at him, like, "What's going on with you?" But he was right. He died a few months later, and he was living in Germany. So he came to France for the funeral, and that's when all of us saw him for the last time. So you're right. In hindsight, it feels like there could have been signs, or maybe they felt it somehow. Yeah, we will never know, but we're certainly allowed to believe that. Yes, I agree.
And because I've heard of cases like that as well, there was a friend of mine, his parents, who wouldn't have went on much holidays, but they went to Spain, and her husband died in the bed next to her. And you hear of cases like that. So your brother was in Germany. Like, that's an additional trauma, because whether you have to go retrieve the body or decide to cremate him, but there's just so much extra on top of that. And like, how did you navigate that one? Because obviously, if he was in Germany and you weren't there.
Yes, that was in terms of a geographical um like situation for the whole family. It was very tricky. My mom, who was still alive back then, she was living in Bolivia in the jungle. I was in England, in Reading. My younger brother, who's still alive, was in France, the only one still in France. And then my older brother was in Germany. So we were all in different countries. And when my brother died, it was shortly before lockdown happened, which means that then we were all locked away, far away from each other, completely isolated on our own. And it's only afterwards that I realized how hard this had been, because I had literally no one to give me a hug, no shoulder to cry on, no one to talk about him. And that was difficult to be like in different countries at that period. Yeah. I remember my mom, she did something really beautiful. She started painting flowers on her house. That was her activity during lockdown. I think as a response, to that despair, as a mom who had lost her second son, she was painting flowers on her house.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had 2 to 4 years, depending on what country, and it was all orchestrated. And it's horrible, because I've even had a friend, and his mother was in hospital, and I'm like a mummy's boy. My mom is still alive, and she stayed when I had the injury. So I was telling you that just for those that might know, I sprained my back in 3 places. So my mother extended the stay for Christmas, and I'd be talking to her all the time. And I'm after missing my point, when I was saying that, but like, I'm basically, I'd ring my mother every day. But I might come back to the point, sorry about this, but one of the things that I've noticed is in Ireland, when somebody passes, there's usually the removal. People go to the funeral home, they see the body, maybe the next day they're going to the church, to the grave. I've seen in the UK, it can be 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know what it's like, France and Germany. I like the way it's done in Ireland. I think the Muslim, they do it within a day, as far as I know. They clean the body. Every society does it differently. And I, like, for me, it must be harder when it takes 2 weeks or something like that, because it's a lot longer for closure. And I just,
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting insight. Yeah. I mean, for my older brother, it was 3 weeks because many people wanted to come also from abroad. And it feels very long on one hand, but then it also feels like there's something to hold on to. You know, it's like it's not quite over yet. It's after the funeral that everyone goes back to their life. Everyone, which is completely normal. Like the world doesn't stop for everyone. The world stops for those who were super close to the person who passed. And after the funeral, that's when it gets very lonely. So sometimes when there is a bit of a gap between the death and the funeral, it gives you something to hold on to as well. But I think, at the end of the day, it's just really hard. And there might be variations of hard. But, sometimes people say, oh, is it harder when the person dies suddenly? Or is it harder when the person goes through a terminal illness? Or doesn't really matter, right? There's no hierarchy really. It's just hard. And then you just deal with it in different ways, and your body will also react in different ways. And this is maybe something that could be interesting for your audience because, you talk a lot about mindfulness and meditations, and I found that really helpful because I realized later, once I started to dive into the science behind grief, that the body was really affected as well, and the inflammatory markers are high, the immune system struggles, sleep is disrupted, digestion is disrupted, and there are physiological changes in the brain that are similar to an actual physical injury, which is incredible. And when you read that, you understand that meditation or some form of mindfulness can really help in ways that we don't necessarily think of when we think of grief. But, if you bring your body into a rest and digest mode through some mindfulness, you actually signal your body safety, which will then help the body get to work and reduce the inflammation, strengthen the immune system, helps you regulate your sleep again. And sometimes I found that meditation has helped me to tend to my body, which then in return has helped me to manage my emotions around grief, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And like there's people then that suppress it. And it's like they're holding a face, but when you know them deeply, you know they're hurting, but they're like, perhaps not crying, just as if everything is grand. But I've heard about it. Then it comes back in chronic pain and lots of different things that it comes out. So you might kind of touch on that because there is people that are doing that, and sometimes it's like a parent that's trying to be strong for the rest of the family to kind of keep everything together. Because if they break down, they're afraid the whole thing falls apart. When in reality, we all accept that if somebody's grieving, it's okay to cry.
Yeah. So that's actually a really good point, right? Because these are mostly the people that I work with, exactly those who have no choice but to show up. So they're grieving, their whole world has crumbled, they have an internal meltdown, but from the outside, they do what needs to be done. They look after the kids, if they're carers, they look after their parents maybe, they have high responsibility jobs, they work in medical service, like, people who they just don't have the option to take 6 months off for their grief, which would be amazing. Like I so wish everyone could do that. And in that case, there is a protective mode, which is numbing. And this is, sometimes we almost feel like blaming the person, saying like, but you can't just pretend it hasn't happened. You have to let it out. Well, one, it's super scary because it's so ridiculously painful. It's like tearing you apart from the inside. So you kind of want to avoid that type of pain. And then second, it's also the body and the brain protecting us. Because, it's so difficult to manage, especially at the beginning, the intensity of the pain of grief, that the body decides to numb it. And then we can get back to it later. And that's the key. It's to get back to it later. You cannot ignore it forever. So the analogy that I like to do when people ask me, but how do I know? How do I know if I need to do something, if I'm numbing myself, well, grief is like a wound, literally and figuratively. Grief is like a wound. And if you think of a wound, well, some wounds do heal on their own. They do. Our bodies, our minds, our souls, our brains are amazing. And an emotional wound can also heal on its own. But some don't. And when the wound of grief doesn't heal on its own, just like any other wound, it doesn't just stay as it is. It gets worse. It festers. And that's where the problem lies. So I always invite people to ask themselves, do you have a sense that it is getting better, even slowly, over time, that the episodes of grief are less regular, that you find yourself smiling a little bit more, maybe even laughing a little bit more often? Or does it feel like you're still stuck in it after 2, 3, 4 years? In which case, I would highly recommend to get some support. And that could be from friends, from a group, in the village, but to not stay alone in that suffering.
And I've actually thought of what I was going to say earlier, because we were talking about the lockdown, and that's why I was saying, like, I'm a mummy's boy because I'm so close to my mother, ringing her every day. He's the same. Like, he used to go on holidays all the time with his parents, and she got Alzheimer's during the lockdown, and she was in the hospital, and he wasn't allowed to see her. And and that happened with a lot of people as well. So there's that kind of trauma. There's one of the things that what I've kind of noticed is, maybe I was younger, but like, I remember seeing my father in the grave, and it was like, I know his soul is left. I could see the hands were short or smaller and everything. It was like, it wasn't that I wasn't sad or anything. Like, of course I was, but it was kind of like I accepted it. But there's other times, like, I'm looking at the body, and it's like, I'm thinking they look still alive. And that's a strange feeling then as well, because it's like, when you know it, you kind of accept it and you go, okay, they're gone to a better place. And then there's others thing, and I'm just wondering, have you ever experienced that, or with some of the clients that you spoke to?
Yes, and what you're actually mentioning is something that happens in the brain, and I found that when I was experiencing grief in lockdown after my brother died, I started to read about the neuroscience of grief and to understand what's going on, because it felt like data, numbers, figures, like something pragmatic, was something I could hold on to when everything else was crumbling and falling apart. And we have, I hope you don't mind me explaining that, because I think it's an interesting insight into how grief works in our brain. And so for every relationship we have in our life, we have a 3-dimensional map. We relate to the people that are important to us in terms of time, location, and closeness. So if I ask you, for example, where is your mom right now? You're probably able to answer the question. If I ask you, when will you roughly interact with your mom again? When will you see her or talk to her again? You will probably be able to answer the question. And if I say, how close are you to your mom? You will also be able to answer the question. So if your mom goes traveling, for example, you will know that within landing, she will probably call you within 2 or 3 hours. And if you haven't heard from her within 24 hours, you're going to start to get worried, because in your brain map, the time that is related to the relationship with your mom does not match, so you know when you're going to hear from her. And this is a really important part, because these are things that regulate our system. And grief waves are so violent and so hard because there is a glitch between reality and what is still ingrained in our brain. These 3-dimensional maps, they've taken a long time to develop, and they do not disappear overnight. And what the brain needs, or what helps the brain best to adapt, to recalibrate, to adjust to the new reality, is lived experience. So in your head, like someone who's lost their spouse, in their head, they will know this person is dead, my loved one is no longer here, but yet every morning waking up will be difficult, and it will take a few mornings waking up without them in the bed. It will take a few lived experiences for the brain to register, this is how it is now. And so to come back to your question, it's very similar, because like you say, sometimes you can really register, you can see with your eyes that person is dead, that person looks dead, but sometimes they don't look dead. So when they don't, the brain doesn't get that lived experience, and can just still keep thinking, well, they look like they sleep, like there's nothing wrong with what I see here. So I hope that makes sense.
Yes,
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on the time of people, kind of even with working. When my grandmother passed, it's probably nearly 10 years now, but I was extremely close to her as well. Like, when I was going to school, I used to go for lunch every day, and even when I moved to Poland, I'd ring her every week. And and she got cancer, so she got a few months. But I was able to go back for a month, spend time with her, hold her hand in bed, and just.
Oh.
And I remember she used like Turkish delights, and that's a special kind of chocolate. You probably know it from the UK.
Yes. Yeah.
And we cut it into a tiny little box, and it was like she was eating the best steak of her life. And I remember my mom saying, "How did you think of that?" And it was, but I had, because I was I'm working for myself for the last 20 years, I had the ability to do that and then stay for, so I was there for a month. I had time to kind of spend time with her, say goodbye, and then be with family and everything. But depending on the countries, some people, they don't even get a day, or they get a day, especially if it's a parent or a brother or sister. And then they're coming back to work and they're numb, and sometimes they're getting fired because they're not performing. And it's like, we should have real compassion for that. There should be at least a month when you take, like for a parent or a brother, and that's not even little, because sometimes it takes 3 to 6 months. I mean, it varies with how you react to, sometimes it's like you just accept it. There's other times you'll be thinking of the person, you always think of someone this close, but at the start. And like,
Yes.
because you're kind of familiar with UK, France, Germany, like what do you know what the rules are? Is there any country that kind of got it right?
Yeah, well, not that I know of. Not that I know of. And that is a problem. And if like it is a problem from a human perspective, emotionally, because it's just torturous having to go back to work after, in the UK, it's anything between 3 and 14 days that, the company might give you. But you know how much it costs the UK economy every year? Grief that is not attended at the workplace. It's estimated to cost £23 billion per year, which is ridiculous. So, I mean, I think, like you say, companies and the corporate world should really think about it also for their own benefit. It's not just, it's like smart management to help people go through grief. And like I mentioned earlier, it affects your immune system and your inflammatory markers, and you really have brain fog. You really cannot focus like you used to do before. It's impossible. And we are in a society, in our Western society, where really, like you said, grief is rushed, and we're expecting people to get back to normal quite quickly. And it's almost as if going back to being productive requires an effort. It's almost like you can think your way to that. But guess what? If someone has a broken arm, would anyone even think about telling them, can you please hurry up the healing process? Can you please think your way towards mending your broken arm faster? Can you make an effort?
Broken back, I think they're all I'll make it work.
Right? I mean, that sounds ridiculous. Like, no one would ever say that. If you have the flu, like, no one would say, come on, like, 2 days, 48 hours, get on with it. And it's the same for grief. It's not a lack of willpower. It's not that people aren't engaged anymore. It's that they literally cannot, from a physiological perspective. Their body is exhausted. When we lose a loved one, the people we love are part of our co-regulation system. So we need them like we need food and water. And when they disappear, the body is in the threat response. It's just extremely stressful. And when the body feels stressed and threatened as highly as when grief happens, all the energy is dedicated to that. And there's not much left for day-to-day stuff, and certainly not for work, So you are absolutely right. There's a lot of work to be done here. And it's, I find that I see that in my work. If you help people manage grief, go through grief, the skills you learn to manage these highly difficult and painful emotions, they are skills that you keep for life and that you can apply to anything, because life is not a fairy tale. There will always be challenges, and it's about learning how to stay within a window of tolerance where we can manage these challenges. We cannot make them disappear. They will always be there, but we can learn to handle them and to stay in a state, in a space where we do not burn ourselves out, And there's that term window of tolerance is really interesting. It was coined in the 90s, I think. And basically, within that window of tolerance, we can manage the different ups and downs of life. But if we go above, we become irritable, restless, angry. And if we go below, we become lethargic, sad, unmotivated. We can all relate to that, right? So the skills you learn to manage grief are these, to remain within your window of tolerance and to gauge your window of tolerance in any given moment. And that is applicable to anything in life. So if corporates would, understand that and make an effort to help people in the workplace, it would make such a huge difference on so many levels.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if you kind of touch on this one, but, like when you're at the church or the funeral home, people giving their condolences, it's typical in Ireland that people just shake your hand and sorry for your loss and they just move on. And what I found actually with my father, there was friends of his that came along. I started telling me stories about him that I never even heard of. And that was a beautiful thing. But like you mentioned, your brother and that you weren't there. Like even if somebody calling you to just give you a hug or something like that. And some people are afraid to interact because they don't know what to do. And like when my dad had died, and my brother came from Ireland, I came, from Poland. And one person across the street that I knew when I was younger, so similar age, she just came over with a bag. And she goes, look, I know you're going through grief. I don't want to come in. She handed, there was bread, there was milk, there was cakes. It's just
Amazing.
a lovely touch. And it's like, I think things like that, people don't think of it, but that can really help.
Yeah.
Because you're not thinking of going shopping and stuff like that. Your head isn't there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like somebody recently that I met through a podcast and we just kind of stayed in contact, but not that close. But I saw he wrote, because I was on his newsletter and something similar, his father had died and his father had been with him. And I just kind of wrote a nice message and he left a voice message back saying how it touched him. And whereas a lot of times people, they're just afraid. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. Like, do you cover that? Or how do you navigate? Because most people are afraid they're like paralyzed.
Yes, they are paralyzed. And I'm glad you bring it up this way because I find that sometimes it hurts my heart because there's a lot of blame sometimes. They're like, oh, people say this and that and it's wrong or they don't say anything. But I truly believe that really people want to help. But like you say, they're afraid. They're just afraid that if they bring up the name or if they say something wrong, it might make it worse and the person might collapse and cry. And again, in our Western societies, we're very uncomfortable with other people's sadness. We don't really know how to handle it. So I think, having conversations like these on a podcast, it's fantastic because we open up the conversation. So there's also a little bit of responsibility for each of us to be a bit more open about grief, to normalize the conversations about grief. But something, so, there are some things you absolutely want to avoid. It's like trying to comfort people with positivity, with something like, oh, well, at least they're in a better place now, or at least they had a good life, or something like that. Or, like this is really, really painful, really painful. But on the other hand, things that do not even require words, like preparing meals and leave them at the front door, taking over the grocery shopping for a week, taking care of the dog, walking the dog, going with the person who's grieving to a medical appointment, getting their medication for them, helping in the house. These are things that can really be helpful because what many people will say is, oh, if you need anything, just tell me. But someone who's grieving, they have no idea what they need. They don't know. They do not know what they need. And sometimes they just need someone to make them a cup of tea or to prepare a meal because they're not going to think of eating. One thing I would say, though, is that whatever is in the house, or be very mindful not to touch or move or clean anything without having double checked that it's okay. I remember a friend of my sister-in-law, she was helping, and she thought she'd do well cleaning the kitchen, and she threw away the water and cleaned the glass that my brother had used before his accident. And my sister-in-law was just devastated, and she didn't dare to say anything. She was like, I know she meant well, but she was horrified that this glass wasn't in the kitchen anymore. So just be mindful to not, do the laundry or do, cut any plants in the garden, stuff like that. But yeah, I would say something simple and that can be helpful, I found, is to offer a plant, because, when someone dies, death is very heavy in the house. So to have something that lives, as simple as a plant, can be quite therapeutic. Tending to something that is actually alive and not just a bouquet of flower that will also die. And that can be quite daunting to throw away. Yeah.
And like, there's also the preparation as well, because when I think I was like 26, 28, I think I was 26, I bought my first house, and I had a will at 28, and I was kind of, well, who's going, with my mum, we've had conversations. I mean, I'd love she'd be immortal, we all would, but reality is, we know exactly her wishes, and a lot of people, they don't have that conversation, and they're going through the grief, and then they're trying to resolve things they don't know nothing. And unfortunately, then there's people fighting over finances, and then you're going through grief, and then you're going through hatred and everything. And I think it's just, we should face it. It's a reality. We're all going to pass. Nobody kind of can confirm where we're going, but let's hope it's going to be better.
If there's one certitude in life, there's one certainty, it's this one. We're all going to die. And I think it's brilliant that you had a will at 28 and that you're having these conversations with your mom, because I personally think it's very generous. You want to spare your loved ones to having to make all these decisions. And so it is, it is a hard conversation to have, but when I was when I was a teenager, my mum had transformed our private home into a care home. So I was 15 and I was looking after 90-plus-year-olds, and it was like a bit of a hospice. They would be here to die. And so I've experienced that. What you say, that even at that age, So that's the point. That's what I wanted to say. So I remember I was 15. And when these people in their bed, they were obviously dying, they were like 98, 99. The doctors had said to the family, come and say goodbye. And when these people would say, oh, I think I'm going to die soon, their own children would be like, oh, no, don't be silly. Oh, no, of course not. And I felt like there's something odd here, because they are dying. And I was 15 and I thought, if I was dying, I think I would want to talk to someone. I would want to share that, because I'd probably be freaking out, or I'd probably be, I don't know, enlightened or whatever, but it would probably be important enough to me to be willing to talk about it. So I started talking to these people and say, how do you feel about it? How do you, and this is also very important, I think. And I'm so grateful I wasn't scared of this, I wasn't too intimidated to talk to them. And they would say, I'm afraid of suffering, or I'm looking forward to seeing my mom or my husband again. But they were actually really happy to talk about it. And I did that with my mom as well, who died more recently. And we had a lot of conversations. And I found it has made the grieving process more manageable, because my mom would always say, I'm ready now. I'm ready to go. I've had a wonderful life. I just want to be with my kids, with my husband. She said that she was grateful. She like, you are happy. Your brother is happy. And even though I was very sad when she died, I also found a lot of comfort knowing that she was okay. And that was only because we had talked about it. So you are so, so right. It's super important to have these conversations, because no one will escape death. That's just how it is. The likelihood of being alive is, I can't remember, there's an equation. It's incredible. So we're basically all miracles. But the likelihood of dying, 100%.
It's the same as paying taxes. There's no way out of it. You can reduce it, but you're still going to be paying it some form.
Exactly.
And because I saw the Pilates and stuff like that, was that something that you got into to kind of help with the grief, or what was that about?
Well, no, I have been doing Pilates for a very long time, and meditations as well. I've been meditating daily for many, many, many years, and I'm grateful I did. But Pilates, I found, and movement, also strength training, just depends what your nervous system can take. But Pilates in particular, I found helpful because, like I mentioned earlier, the body is highly stressed, and we cannot think ourselves to calmness. You cannot tell yourself, okay, I need to calm down, I need to relax. If someone says that to you while you're, in a crisis, it's going to backfire. It's not going to work. That's not how it works. But when everything is too much, when the emotions are too much, when the pain, the sadness is too much, we can always go back to the body. And I find movement starting with breath work. Breathing is a movement, basic movement, but it's a movement. And slow, mindful movement like Pilates, where you really take time. So the Pilates I teach, it's not a workout. It's really taking time to move, to feel the body. And what this does, on top of all the benefits we know that movement does, it signals safety to the nervous system. Moving slowly and mindfully just tells the nervous system, okay, there is no imminent danger. There is no threat. This is why she moves slowly. If there was a threat, she wouldn't be moving so slowly. So it's almost mechanical. And that signals safety to the body. And then, the mind can follow and relax. So when I was really at my lowest, and I couldn't find a way out. Like even meditation was difficult. I would cry all the time. And I decided to tend to my body in a very simple way with very simple things, but that I would do every single day and just tick the boxes. And it takes time, but it's just like going to the gym. You go to the gym once, you're not going to see any difference. You go twice, you go 10 times, you're not going to see any difference. But you go every day for a year, you will see a difference. There's just no way around it. And so what I started to do was to get daylight every morning to help reset my circadian clock, to help me with sleep, to hydrate and eat clean, real foods, just to try to avoid more inflammation. Move gently outdoors, ideally, just walk or stretch or and surround myself with good people, which is also good for the body. But really simple things. And movement was stretching, Pilates, walking, very, very gentle stuff. And these things like hydrating and eating real foods, they're often overlooked, but they have a real effect on our well-being. There's a really good scientist. Her name is Lisa Feldman Barrett. She specialized in emotions, and she coins this. I really like that. She talks about the body budget, and she says if your body budget is depleted, your difficult emotions will be heightened. So sometimes, let's say outside of grief, if we feel a bit low or if we feel a bit groggy or a bit grumpy, it might just be that we didn't have enough sleep. It might just be that we're dehydrated, that we're lacking the vitamins and the fibers. I mean, we all know that if we don't sleep well, we're not quite as joyful and upbeat as we normally are. So that's our body budget, and we can tend to that in very simple and pragmatic ways. And I found that Pilates is included in that because it's very, I don't want to say clinical, but you can just follow. You just follow and tick the boxes, and it's going to do you good.
I remember a few years ago I joined the gym because I was always playing squash and different things, and you'd always get a tweak in your back every quarter or whatever for a day or two that something and you'd be stiff. And once I started, it was kind of back exercises, what they called it, but like you're putting your hands up in the air and everything, which you're not normally doing because unless you're reaching for something in shelves and stuff like that. Whereas when you're younger, you're doing all that stuff, and I didn't get. My back was for a couple of years that nothing happened. That just by the movement, and it makes sense. And touching on the breathwork, because I mean, I've gone to a lot of kind of events and seen different kind of facilitators and everything, and like that definitely, you don't have to be hyperventilating because there's so many different versions. Just breathe as well. But I've seen I think they suppress that. They don't let people know how important it is. But you can feel so much better and control just by doing, and I wish it was more mainstream. The way like some people are going to churches, whatever their belief system. It'd be nice if you could just go to a nice place and do a breathwork session that you could go weekly, because like that would definitely fill your cup.
Oh my God, yes, 100%. And also to teach it to children. Like I have my little nephew, I teach him breathwork, and he goes back to it when he's stressed at school or when he has an exam, and it's so simple. And I quite like to explain it to people from a very biological perspective, because sometimes, I just want to say, like, this is not woo-woo, okay? This is not out there. This is not a new agey thing. It's physiological. So if you do certain things with your lungs, it has an impact on your physiology, which will then impact your stress levels. And even if you didn't want it to work, it would still work because it's a mechanism and it is available. Even if we break a leg, we can still access our breathing. And on top of that, it's cleansing the body. I mean, there's no better detox than heavy breathing and sweating. So it has many, many, many benefits.
Definitely. With the different people that you're kind of, you're helping, do you see common trends or something that you go, this is kind of, most people are kind of feeling a certain thing?
Yes, yes. And it actually started with my own experience. It's that fact that, when you lose a loved one, you kind of capitulate and think, well, this is how I'm going to feel now. I'm always going to be at the mercy of grief waves, of triggers hitting me out of nowhere. I'm never going to be fully happy again. I'm always going to be a victim of grief. That's how I felt. I'm always going to be a victim of grief. Grief will just decide when it's going to rush into my life at what time, because I could not prevent it. I could not premeditate it. It would just hit me out of nowhere. And this is something I've seen a lot among people who are grieving, that idea that there's a complete loss of control and that grief is ruling the show now. And I am here to say, no, it doesn't have to be like that. Because, after my dad died and my younger brother, I went through life for decades constantly bracing for waves of grief, and I could not stop them, and they would take away precious moments that I had with loved ones. If a song came on the radio in a restaurant, I would have to leave the table and cry in the toilets before being able to come back to the table. And when my older brother died, I got so angry because I thought, oh my God, that unattended grief stole time away. I could have spent more mindfully with my brother. I was still so much grieving and so much a victim of, the having lost my younger brother, that I missed out on time with my older brother. And that I was like, that's over now. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to reclaim agency. I'm going to reclaim control, and I'm going to be the boss again in my life. So grief is still there, but now it's in my own terms. And that is something that I see, that notion of there's nothing I can do. That's just how it's going to be now. Well, I'm here to say no. This can change. We can reclaim agency in very pragmatic ways.
And with yourself and perhaps some of your clients as well, I remember when my grandmother passed, my mom was telling me, my mom was in the house, we returned home at this stage, and a painting that it wasn't a painting, it was a picture. I got a kind of religious picture because she was religious, and it just fell off the wall. It was there for over 10 years, just fell off the wall. There was a musical thing just started playing. And there was a few other things that happened as well. And at another funeral that I was at here, there was a guy I was doing business with, and his girlfriend, she was young. She got some blood disease. She was 21 or something like that. And I was at the funeral, but it was in the winter. And I saw a butterfly fly over the thing. And I thought, that's a sign. But I said nothing to no one. And a couple of months later, I was talking to him and I just said it. And he said, I thought I dreamt that. He saw it himself, but he thought that can't be right. The butterflies aren't out at that thing. Yeah. Exactly. And it was, and you hear, and just do you have people talking about that? Did you experience? I think it's a way of saying it's okay. It's them telling us it's okay.
Yes, exactly. And there's a book that came out recently by a neuroscientist called Dr. Tara Swart. And I think it's called Signs. And she wrote that book after her husband had passed, and it's her experience of grief as well, where she explains these signs, and people certainly do have experiences. I mean, when you open up, when you start conversations, it's almost like everyone has a story like that to tell. The robin in the garden, the white feathers, and things that just cannot be random, cannot be coincidence, so there's always going to be the skeptical saying, oh yeah, but no, just be, pragmatic, realistic. But at the end of the day, we don't know. Maybe there truly are signs, and they are here to tell us it's fine. I'm okay where I am. I'm watching over you. Yeah, I do believe that as well.
So you've got courses then, because I was just looking at so you might let the listeners know what kind of courses, what you're offering.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Roy. So I've realized in with grief that it's such a delicate topic and emotions are very heightened. And sometimes it's easier for people not having to talk to anyone or not having to, face anyone with their with these emotions. So I created these digital courses that people can do at home in their own time. And they are basically the information that has helped me a lot. So one of them, for example, is about what's happening in the brain, and I called it No, You're Not Crazy. Because when you lose someone, sometimes you feel like you're losing it yourself. Like, why do I still feel like I want to call them? Why do I still feel like they're going to walk through the door? Why do I feel like I can see them in the crowd? And you start by doubting yourself, and other experiences people might have about grief. They feel like, oh, is it me? Am I mad? Am I bonkers? Am I losing it? So, for that, for example, I created one about sibling grief as well, because it's very often overlooked. I lost two brothers, so unfortunately, I know this quite well. And when you lose a sibling, people always ask how your parents are. How's your mom? How's your mom doing? So I created online courses, digital resources for people to just do in their own time. And then I also offer online Pilates and one-to-ones and meditations as well, because I found that really, really helpful. So on my website, you'll find a lot of free resources. I write a lot. I love writing. So I have articles, blogs, like the meditations. These are all free. And then the courses and the one-to-ones.
And I know we've spoke prior to recording, and you're going to give me some meditations which will go out after this episode. So we're going to have in French, German, and English, so that I'm covering. Because I actually have followers in over 100 countries. So some people they speak English as well, but might be living in Germany, and I just think it's lovely. So I'll put the initial of the country or the name of the country before the meditation, so people will be able to know. But I appreciate you giving me them.
Oh, yeah, yeah, my pleasure. I love, I'll tell you quickly how I started doing them, because that was completely unexpected. So I've always done meditations at the end of my Pilates classes, and then lockdown happened, and I started teaching Pilates online, but I didn't do the meditation. And people were asking, they're like, where are the meditations? We really miss them. And so I started doing meditations every night on Zoom for free during lockdown. And surprisingly, many people joined, because people would give the link to their family, their friends, and so I thought, oh well, I might as well record them and put them on Spotify. And it's been growing very organically ever since. So it just shows, I mean, you would know better than anyone, but the demand, like people are craving, tools to just find back to themselves and understand themselves and the world around them a little better.
And because sometimes people say, oh, I can't meditate, I don't have time. And that's why I've even meditations from 1 minute, and some go up to 2 hours.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I think people can resonate with something. And everybody, I was listening to yours, and I just love your voice, and it's just soothing and everything. And sometimes that kind of, because people then can connect with that, and they're just the words and just the title as well, what it's connected with. And if I feel like that things like that land on someone's lap, because we find things that we're not searching for, just appear somewhere, and it's just at the right time. You're going, wow, it's great. And I think the same happens with meditations, that somebody finds it when they need it. And that's what I love. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that, Roy, because that was exactly what I thought when I created my Spotify. I thought, well, whoever needs it, it will find whoever needs it. I believe that too. And I think it's the same with books. The right books will find us at the right time. Yeah, I love that mindset. Yeah, I completely agree. We're on the same page.
And just that you mentioned about the books, because I know I mentioned about my dad, but when I was younger, I had, they told me a trapped nerve, and I tried everything. I was reading it out to my friend recently. I have a little book, and I was 5 years, and I was telling him all the things I'd done: chiropractor, faith healer, spiritual healer, everything. I got an epidural, and then I got the operation. I was trying everything.
Good. Yeah.
And in the end, I don't know who told, I don't know how I came across it, a book, Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. And it was a mental thing, and I was able to cure myself. When I'd given up, I was like, I don't want to continue with this. And I recommended that book to over 20 people, because some people get it down their arm, others get it down their leg.
Yes.
And it's actually you suppressing emotions. and it's coming out in the body. And that's kind of similar to grief as well. So that's what I was going to mention.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. And I think we underestimate the power we have to heal ourselves physically and emotionally because they are linked. And we can think our way to physical health, I believe that. And we can use our body, look after our body for emotional health. Absolutely. Yeah.
Listen, Sylvia, thoroughly enjoyed it. And what I say as well, because you had mentioned it and I didn't think of it, for those learning either French or German, it's a good way because you can listen to the English one, understand it, and then listen to the German one. And it's a good way of listening to learn a language. So that's language learning as well as a nice meditation. So,
Multiple.
so you might let the listeners know where they can find you.
Well, it's very simple. It's my name, sylviawolfer.com, and everything is on the website. All the information is on the website.
Okay. And that's WOLFER, just for those.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Like wolf, the animal, and ER. Yes, Sylvia Wolfer.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll make sure all the links have been in the audio and the video. So that's all for the meditation podcast. You can find everything about me. Scan the QR code or go to roycullen.com. You find my 6 podcasts as well as all my podcast coaching. And if you're looking for virtual assistants, go to va.world. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with 3 friends. And when you check out Sylvia's Spotify, do the same thing because it really helps. What it does, it shares it to more people. Until next week, take care.